special counsel. I think one of the reasons why he appointed special counsel was to get the investigation as far away from Andy McCabe as possible, because at this point, McCabe clearly had an axe to grind with the president. I don't know if Andy McCabe himself would have leaked this, but I do suspect that somebody on Team McCabe is trying to put this stuff out there to get the president to fire Rosenstein, to create a politically charged environment going into the midterms, and that would be to the detriment of the president.
That's Ian Pryor, used to work at the Justice Department, a kind of pro-Rosenstein spin on what happened at that dramatic meeting, May 2017. Let's go right to our exclusive guest, Congressman Devin Nunes from California, joining us live out there. Obviously, he's the chairman of the House Intel Committee. And I wonder, when you hear that, what he was trying to say is that this story was leaked by Andrew McCabe. McCabe's backed into a corner because he's under federal investigation for lying and leaking, and that all Rosenstein saw from that meeting was that McCabe was anti-Trump and that he could not be fair to the president, and that it was really McCabe who planted the seed about wiring the president. Do you buy that?
I think I buy the part that it was probably McCabe's team that did leak that. However, it's not something that you joke about. It's not something that you're sarcastic about. And I've had these run-ins, our committee, trying to get documents with Rod Rosenstein and many people within DOJ. So similar types of run-ins where there's not a lot of sarcasm, but there's awfully a lot of threats and a lot of stonewalling.
Yeah.
So I do believe there's a McCabe-Rosenstein fight going on, but that's probably where it ends.
Yeah, no, there is. But when you're having a conversation about invoking the 25th Amendment, trying to get to John Kelly and Jeff Sessions, and maybe they'd come together and we could invoke this, remove this president by another means, wiretapping, or excuse me, wearing a wire potentially. The article shows that some say it was sarcasm, but some say it was actually a quite serious conversation, that he was a bit stern about that. Are you concerned that those sentiments still exist inside the Justice Department right now?
Well, not only that, but you also had at the time, the mainstream media was putting that spin out there. So, and a lot of times the mainstream media is talking to the FBI and DOJ officials. We know that because they were all leaking. And so this was a spin that they were trying to get out there. We also know now that the investigators had no evidence of the Trump campaign colluding with Russians. So really the question is what was the investigation about to begin with? So if they're talking about wearing wires, 25th Amendment, but they have no evidence of Trump colluding with Russians from some of the top investigators, we now know that from text messages, this is really an investigation in search of a crime. So we haven't seen the scope memo. The American people haven't seen it. Congress hasn't seen it. But the press continues to report, well, they were going after an obstruction of justice charge. Well, how do you obstruct an investigation of a counterintelligence investigation of which you have no evidence that the Trump campaign was colluding with Russians? And if he was, it wasn't a crime anyway. I mean, that's really, there's a lot of murkiness here. And I just don't think even sarcastically saying that you're going to wear a wire is a believable story.
Yeah,
especially from my experience dealing with these characters.
Was it sarcasm? Was it something more? Given the information that we have, what should President Trump do?
Well, the first thing he should do is he should declassify all the documents that we've been asking for. So the Bruce Orr 302s, the 20 pages of the remaining content of the FISA that guess who signed? Rod Rosenstein. So the Deputy Attorney General. And remember, it was Rod Rosenstein and DOJ who brought the president into a meeting with a lot of senior intelligence people and said, Mr. President, we have to do something else here. We really need to take care of our national security issues here. We don't want to expose anybody, blah, 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 blah.
But yes or no, should Rosenstein be fired?
Came out and backtracked a little bit.
Should Rosenstein be fired, yes or no?
Well, I don't think, look, the answer I think is no for now, because right now before an election, without knowing all the facts, until you could actually bring in all of these people to know exactly what Rosenstein said. Look, I'm not a guy who's going to go on a witch hunt, right? So Rod Rosenstein should have his fair day in court. However, if Rod Rosenstein really did talk about wearing a wire, then for sure he should be fired.
Okay, now the other thing Rosenstein has been in the middle of, and you alluded to this a moment ago, was trying to get the president to back away from declassifying these documents you want that would show some transparency and let us know how these FISA warrants came together and other things. The president initially indicated he was releasing this. Then on Friday tweeted, I met with the DOJ. concerning the declassification of various unredacted documents. They agreed to release them, but stated that so doing may have a perceived negative impact on the Russia probe. Also, key allies called to ask not to release. Therefore, the Inspector General has been asked to review these documents on an expedited basis. I believe we will move quickly on this and hopefully other things which the IG is looking at. In the end, I can always declassify it if it proves necessary. Speed is important to me and everyone, the president said. I want to pick apart a bunch of things, but one is, in that tweet, the president alluded to key allies calling and saying, don't release this. Could that be the Brits and the Australians who don't want us to know what happened during the Obama administration?
Yeah, so first of all, think about this. If the Brits and the Australians are calling our government to say, don't release the contents of a FISA or the Bruce Orr 302s, well, how would the Australians and the Brits know what's in there? They don't have access to it. So it's okay for the Brits and the Australians to know about this, but not for the American people to have transparency. That story doesn't hold water. What we do know is that we have the former foreign minister of Australia, who is the ambassador in London, who was meeting with Trump campaign officials, and he brought rumor intelligence to the State Department that opened up the investigation into the Trump campaign. We know that that guy has changed his story 4 different times. He wouldn't even answer the question whether or not he was a spy or not, whether or not he was working for someone or not. Now, that was just in the last week. So let's just dismiss them as having a potential conflict. And then you take the Brits. I don't believe that they're going to, that the reason that I've read in the New York Times is that, well, Christopher Steele was a former MI6 guy. Look, this guy, Christopher Steele, is an embarrassment to British intelligence. The folks that I've talked to over there are embarrassed that somebody would go out and start to sell salacious material. So they all know that. And it, just to make the point,
sure,
again, and finalize it with an explanation point, why is it possible that the Brits and the Australians would even know what's in the contents of this FISA? And look, it doesn't harm them at all anyway. Well, there's nothing in there about them.
Were you surprised that the declassification was walked back a little bit? Do you expect us to eventually see these documents?
Well, I'm not surprised in that I'm used to DOJ and the IC putting up these roadblocks to protect themselves. And the question you really have to ask yourself is that Rod Rosenstein signed the last FISA. A lot of the people in there have been really problematic that were in that meeting with the president, have been problematic in terms of full transparency with Congress. Congress is a separate branch of government. We created the Department of Justice. We have senior members of Congress who are former DOJ officials who were elected by their constituents who have asked repeatedly for the president to declassify this. Most notably, the chairman of the oversight, Chairman Gowdy. John Ratcliffe is a former U.S. attorney from Texas. The Congress, separate branch of government, should get priority way before Rod Rosenstein, who actually signed the content, signed the FISA application. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, he seems conflicted. I mean, if you're making a decision about how it looks for you, you might have a reason to hide some things that otherwise the public has a right to see. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
That's right.
All right, thanks for coming on.